James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons. And the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues, and casting out demons. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Y'all may be seated this morning. I remember as a child that when we would go visit my grandparents, my father's parents, and especially during the spring and summer months, and it would be a holiday, it'd be, that we'd go and meet. Sometimes it'd be Easter, it could be July 4th, but invariably that every time we met, me and my cousins, if we were there long enough, and as the evening came, we would play either hide and go seek or kick the can. 1 second. And so we would play hide and go seek or kick the can, where we'd go hide, and and we usually broke up in teams, and we'd come search for each other. And eventually, the kids in my grandparents' neighborhood would come out, and there would be like 30 or 40 of us out there, playing hide and go seek, or sometimes kick the can. But we would do that for hours until our parents would come out of the house and say, "It's time to go. Go find your brother. Go find your sister. It's getting late. We got to go." And so we would, kind of hem and haw and complain, we're just a little bit longer. And usually the answer was no. But there was something exciting about hide and seek. Something exciting, of going hiding, hoping that another person won't find you. Of trying to get to the base. Of even picking the teams. We'd always go by doing, when I was a kid, it was like 4 horses in a barn, 1 jumped out. Or any, mini, mighty, mo. And we would determine who was on each team. And then we'd go search. And it was exciting to hide. It was also exciting to find, to search. To see where you could find them. To see that you could tag someone. To see that you can beat them back to the base. And that, was searching, was finding, was hiding, was looking, was, innocent. It was a game. It was childlike. It was pure. It was joy. And so there's something special about those things that can bring us back to our childhood. And when I reflect on those times, it brings me back to my childhood. It brings me back to a more innocent time, a more pure time, an honest time. Because one thing I've learned of having a child is they can be honest. And they can be pure at the same time. It's a beauty, a rare beauty that the world needs. And so, in this story we have Jesus. And it says he left the synagogue, and we know that he's teaching, that he's preaching, that he's proclaiming the good news. And, in Mark we see his, very action-oriented ministry taking off the ground immediately. We start with him getting baptized by John, going into the desert, getting tempted. And last week, Jesse was talking about those pigs, those pesky pigs, and the demon-possessed man. And what was going on. And in Mark we see a lot of that, a lot of disease, a lot of demon possession. And here we see that Jesus was doing this. He was casting out demons, he was healing the sick, and he was proclaiming the good news. And here in this particular story, he's leaving the synagogue, and he goes into the house of Simon and Andrew. And also with him was James and John. And we know Simon eventually becomes Peter, the rock. And so this is early on in Jesus' ministry. They're being called, and they go to Simon Peter's house, and it says that his mother-in-law is sick. And so they let Jesus know, and they tell him about her. And he comes, and he lifts her up, and he heals her of fever. And it says that she then gets up and serves him. And while he was there, everyone must have heard that Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus that's been preaching the good news and healing, is here in our vicinity, is here in our town. And it says that people began bringing people to the door of Simon Peter's house. That people had brought those that were sick, that were those that were possessed by demons, and Jesus began to heal them and heal them of their diseases and cast out demons. And then we see that he was doing this, and he was telling them, and this has always been quite strange to me, that he didn't allow the demons to speak because they knew who he was. And in Mark especially, we see that theme, that he did not want people to know who he was. That he would say, don't let them know who I am. And in Mark we see that in different instances he slips out of the crowd to get away before they recognize him. And so here again we have this interaction that he wouldn't let the demons speak, so he wouldn't be revealed. And then we know that he goes in the morning, when it's very dark, and he goes to a deserted place, an isolated place. He goes there to pray, to connect back to his source, to be at one with God. I'm sure this was a time where he got his nourishment, a time where his batteries were recharged, a time where he sat in the presence of God, a time of renewing and strengthening himself. And then it says, Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, everyone is searching for you. And this is why, I feel compelled when reading this out of the lectionary to talk on, to speak about. There's many treasures in this passage. But this morning, let us look at what does it mean that Simon and his companions hunted for him, that everyone was searching for him. And again, I like to go back to that story I told opening up about hide and go seek. That there's something fun, joyous, childlike about hide and go seek. And when I hear and I read that they were hunting and searching for him, I wonder if it was like as a child would. I wonder if they were searching him in the sense that they know, even though he is refusing to reveal himself completely, that they know that he has some type of authority. And as children, they look for an authority when they're scared, when they're happy, to see if it's okay to be happy. They look at adults, they look at those that they know care for them. And that's especially true with children. Working in the high school, you learn that students and kids and children and youth are desperately looking for people that care for them. And you can tell who cares for students because you see students reaching out to them. Kids reach out to those that care for them. I think that's a universal truth. Regardless of where you're from and when you're from. Kids know who cares for them. And so I wonder if this searching and this, looking for Jesus is not unlike a child looking for one that they know cares for them. And indeed, we know that Jesus Christ cares. In a sometimes unforgiving, unflinching world, aren't we all desperate to encounter the one that cares for us? And is that not Jesus Christ? And so it says they hunted for him. I know that we got some hunters here in the church. And I love hearing y'all's stories about succeeding. And I grieve when I hear your stories of not succeeding. But I was thinking about that. There's a big difference, and I imagine you would agree, that when you're hunting for recreational purposes and that when you're hunting for survival. I imagine there's a big difference when you're hunting for, get some good meat on the table, and hunting for you like being out the woods and all the components of hunting. But when you're hunting because you are starving, it makes a difference. I bet it makes a difference on what you are hunting for, how big something can be that you will take it down. It makes a difference when you're thinking about, I need sustenance, I need nourishment, I need something that's going to keep me alive. And again, I think about these people looking and hunting, says hunting for Jesus. Maybe it's not unlike those that hunt. Knowing that what they hunt for brings sustenance, brings life, brings nourishment. And again, I think about these terms, hunting and searching. And I'm reminded of the story of Adolf Eichmann. If you're not aware who Adolf Eichmann was, during World War II and the Holocaust, he was one of the masterminds and logistics expert in the Holocaust, in the final solution. He was there as, Reinhard Heydrich's right-hand man. He was at the Wannsee Conference, in which these group of Nazi leaders came and to determine how they're going to carry out the final solution, which, was the apparatus to be used for the extermination of the Jewish people. That Adolf Eichmann was so good at what he did that nearly 90% of Jews in Europe were killed. That he was a mastermind, a logician, a logistics expert. That if you met him personally, you think he would be mild-mannered. And so at the close of the war, we know that a lot of Nazis and war criminals escaped. They escaped to various parts of the world. They hid their identity. Some of them opting to live amongst, their own in Germany with false identities. There was almost a Nazi underground where people were helping them escape. So much so that less than 15% of all war criminals during that were part of the Nazi regime were ever persecuted or tried, prosecuted or tried. And Adolf Eichmann, being one of those, he slipped out. That he made it to Argentina. And he lived there, raised a family, kind of, adopted the culture for years. And we know that the story goes that, in 1948 that Israel becomes a nation. And they would talk about never again with regards to the Holocaust, in regards to what happened. Their motto, even to this day, is never again. And so if you know anything about the Israelis, that they can be efficient. And no, I'm not talking about the geopolitical situation we're having on today. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about in 1948, when they came as a nation, when they're still in the horrors of the Holocaust, where many Holocaust survivors themselves moved to. We know of that the government there created the Mossad. They're kind of their spy or secret service networks. And the Mossad, one of their tasks was that they were Nazi hunters. Again, we're looking at that term, hunting. And so their task was to hunt Nazis. Hunt those that were part of this, this tragedy, this Holocaust. In Hebrew, in Israel, they refer to the Holocaust as the Shoah, which means the cataclysmic destruction of the Jewish people. And so, of course, they want justice. That this needs to be reckoned with. And the rest of the world didn't seem that was important. Of course, we have the Nuremberg trials. And of course, there was some justice. But not nearly enough. And so these Mossad Nazi hunters would go out and they would, and with intelligence agents, would find these Nazis. And so somehow they got a report of a German-speaking Argentinian. And so they followed up. And they had the Mossad there was monitoring him. And they realized that this was Adolf Eichmann, the logistics masters of the Holocaust, the operator of this apparatus of death. He's the one that, designed the train lines. He's the one that emptied the ghettos. And he's the one that, made sure that the concentration camps were running at full capacity and that there was no error. And he was good at what he did. And so they thought he might have died, but then they found this report and they found out that this is indeed Adolf Eichmann. And so almost like a movie, the Argentinian government wasn't helping him. So the Mossad agents, they jump him, smuggle him in a trunk to get on a plane to smuggle him out of Argentina, breaking a dozen international, laws. And they take him back to Israel to stand trial. And so to talk about hunting, and here, we talk about hunting in the sense of survival and hunting and searching for Jesus in that sense of we connecting to the one that cares. But when I think about those agents, they were tenacious. They had vigor. They had a sense of righteousness that they did not stop. They were relentless for the sake of righteousness, for the sake of justice. And Adolf Eichmann, we learned that, and this is in the 80s, that he'd stand his trial publicly in Israel, and he was condemned to death. And we get that famous line that we hear now ever so often in the news or in media, the banality of evil. And Hannah Arendt was a reporter at the time that was German that was there, and she came up with that phrase, the banality of evil. And I'm sure we've heard that phrase, banality of evil. And they use that to describe Adolf Eichmann because he was unassuming. He was mild-mannered. He wasn't what you would think. But Israel and the Jewish people knew. And that was why they had this fervor of hunting those that did this horror. It gave them vigor. It gave them a thirst for righteousness. And I wonder that some of these early followers of Jesus had that thirst. Because it says this is early on. We're still in chapter 1 of Mark. And they're already hunting down, searching for Jesus. And the only thing we know that he did is that he went to pray by himself. They didn't give him an inch, in their desperation. But that speaks of two things, doesn't it? That our need for Jesus and what Jesus does for us. If we look back, that searching and hunting for Jesus, I'm sure at one point in all of our lives we have done that. When we realize where our strength comes from, where we realize where our hope comes from, our joy, where we find an answer to all this madness. When we find Jesus, we become desperate. Because we, as children, we become desperate because we have found the one that cares for us. We have found the one that sustains us. And we have found the one that makes things right. Righteousness. And we hunt for that Jesus. We hunt for that Jesus that is healing diseases, casting out demons, preaching the good news. And let us not quit searching. Let us not quit hunting. Let us not quit pursuing Jesus in our lives. Because He's there. He's always there. And so in a sense, I wonder that did they really think they lost Him? And this may just be me wondering. I don't know. I don't think they believe they lost Him. I think that they just needed to be around Him. And so they search and they hunt. Let us never stop searching and hunting for Jesus. Because this world is maddening. With the polarization right now we see, with all that's going on, it's hard to make sense. But what we can do is we can hunt for Jesus in the midst of what life brings. We hunt for Jesus in the midst of what's going on in our lives. We hunt for Jesus when everything is at its best and everything is at its worst. Let us not tire for hunting Jesus. And we can look at Jesus in this passage. How do we become a people that does not tire from hunting and searching for Jesus? And I look at Jesus, and one of the things it says He does is He goes up in a deserted place and prays. He sustains that connection with God the Father. He sustains that love, that relationship. I always wondered that He go pray, that He recited or remember Scripture, that He kept Himself connected to the source of life, that He knew it was vital for Him and His ministry to stay connected to God. And aren't we a part of that life? That when we are strengthened by the wellspring of Christ, we can be there as Christ's hands and feet. When we are nourished by the one that nourishes our souls, we can be nourishing for those we encounter. Because we see that just being in proximity to Jesus, people were getting healed and delivered. And when we keep our proximity, we stay close to healing and delivering. We stay close to what God is doing. So let us stay close to Jesus. Let us stay connected to God. And let us not tire in proclaiming the good news. Let us not tire in searching for Christ. Let us not tire for hunting for Him.